Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Washington, interviews of candidates for Supreme Court justices in the August primary. The League is a nonpartisan organization. We never support a party or a candidate. My name is Peggy Watt, and my guest is Debra Stevens, who is running for position 7 on the Washington State Supreme Court. We are asking all the candidates for this office the same 4 questions. Each candidate has up to 90 seconds to answer each question, and the answers are timed. This video of candidate Stevens' responses will remain on our website until after the primary elections on Tuesday, August 4th, 2026. So candidate Stevens, thank you very much for agreeing to this interview and for seeking to serve in public office. Our first question is, what are the benefits of being or not being a judge before running for the state Supreme Court?
Sure, thank you. So I think holding a position on the Washington State Supreme Court involves so many different avenues of work. And so having the experience of serving as a judge, and I've had the honor to serve the people of Washington since 2007, initially on the Court of Appeals for Eastern Washington, that's Division 3, and then since 2008 on the Supreme Court. I think the benefits of that experience are really that you know the flow of the work, you understand the administrative side of the work. You know, we're running a judicial branch of government, trying to improve access to justice, make courts more effective, efficient, and transparent. So learning those lines of work, as well as, of course, deciding some of the most important cases in our state. Every person brings to the position their background and experience in the law, but none of us is an expert on every area of law. So I think over time, hearing a variety of cases and reading the briefing from people who work in those areas of law every day, discussing the issues with colleagues who come from different backgrounds and areas of law, really helps build a body of knowledge. And I have benefited from that experience for the past almost 19 years and hope to carry forward for another term on the Supreme.
Thank you. How would you approach a case in an area of law with which you have no knowledge or experience?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You know, I think that's one people should ask more because we're all going to face that situation. Even after 19 years on the court, you know, some of my experiences as a judicial officer, but never as a lawyer in those areas. And we still see sometimes very novel questions. I think you have to approach it understanding that the parties have done a lot of work bringing us the facts and the law as they see it, and we start by studying what they bring. We also apply a tremendous amount of research, working with our law clerks to help dive into things. And it also requires a healthy dose of judicial humility that, you know, we don't just intuit what the answer ought to be or think that we would know it from our own experience. You know, the path of law is one where the saying couldn't be more true that a page of history is worth a volume of logic. You have to really do the study and learn. And I think anyone who's practiced law knows that there are certain areas you feel like you know, like the back of your hand, and you see the nuances and you bring your expertise to that. Other areas of the law, you don't have that on the ground experience. And so to be a competent and impartial judge of the facts in the law, you have to put in the hard work and benefit from the conversation in a collegial court such as ours.
Thank you. When is it appropriate for the judiciary to overturn a statute or popular referendum?
Well, the court, as members of the judiciary, we take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the state of Washington, the Constitution of the United States, But as the head of the judicial branch, the Supreme Court of Washington is the final arbiter of how we interpret statutes, how we measure statutes against the Constitution. And of course, Washington being an initiative and referendum state, we do have legislation through popular initiative or a referendum on certain legislation. Those measures still must be put up against the Constitution, and the court must sometimes make a hard call to say whether a certain statute or initiative violates the Constitution. In engaging in that work, we look closely at the precedents of the court, interpreting perhaps those statutes and certainly those constitutional provisions. And we will not overturn stare decisis precedent unless we can demonstrate that it's both incorrect, a legal error was made, and also that it is harmful or that the underpinnings for that decision have changed. So the stability in the law, I think, is secured by our careful, faithful adherence to the plain language and the meaning of the Constitution, and also by that careful test before we will depart from prior precedent of the court.
Thank you. Is there a judge or justice in history or today that you most admire, and why?
Oh, the list is long of my heroes in the law, but I'll flag just a couple, and they may seem quite different. On the U.S. Supreme Court, Justice Brennan always inspired me because he wasn't afraid to talk about how the law connects and intersects with the lives of people, in everyday application, and to look closely at our legal traditions, including notably our state constitutional traditions in addition to federal constitutional traditions. He was also a great writer and a hard worker, and I try to, really emulate that work ethic and that commitment to clear writing. I've also greatly admired many of the women justices on the court. I've had the honor of meeting and spending time with Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and what they bring from their perspectives, their lived experience, their legal experience. In Justice O'Connor's instance, she was in the Arizona State Legislature before becoming a judge. All of that experience, I think, really helped shape a path to the law. Closer to home, I've really had the tremendous privilege of learning from two of the state's longest serving justices. Justice Charles Johnson, who will retire at the end of this year, is the longest serving justice in our state's history. And Justice Barbara Madsen, who retired in April, was only the third woman ever on the court, the first woman elected in an open election. And what they carry forward from their time on the court, which saw tremendous growth in the development of our state constitutional law doctrines, I've really benefited from. And I feel like just as they would say they learned at the knee of the great justices on the court who came before them, I've also benefited from what they have shared during their time as colleagues on the court.
Thank you. Once again, thank you for giving the public this insight into your views and values. Viewers, please do not forget to vote by August 4th. You can deposit your ballot in any of the official ballot drop boxes located throughout the state. If you prefer to mail your ballot, it must be postmarked by August 4th to be counted. If you are mailing your ballot after July 27, we recommend you hand it directly to a postal clerk and request a postmark at the counter. You may also return your ballot in person at any county auditor's office. When in doubt, always use a drop box. A complete list of drop box locations is included in the voter's pamphlet. Voters can find additional information about these and other candidates for state and federal offices by visiting vote411.org. This concludes our candidate interview.